Hey everyone, I'm Nito King, and welcome back to Sinner, Sacrifice for Redemption. We're back at the main menu, and I'd like to point out the lack of new game option. You don't get multiple save files, you don't really have the option to start over. If there's anything that you feel that you missed, you just jump right back into the game. You could restart things by just bringing all the bosses you've killed back to life, but who wants to lose progress? Like I said last time, we'll be taking on Slothful Yordo in this video. Not really because I think it's a good idea to fight this guy second. You probably want to wait a little longer to fight him because the sacrifice is awful. But I'm going through in the order that I beat them the first time, and really this is one of the few that I could figure out what I was supposed to do fairly quickly and actually implement the plan. I don't really remember what the story was behind most of the bosses. This one was like a ruler who decided he didn't want to do anything. It's really not all that important to the game itself, as far as I can tell. The story is not deep or profound or impactful in any way. But you've got a whole bunch of guys here, and the one in the fancy headdress is the boss himself. They've all got spears and shields. We're pretty familiar with how to deal with shields in, say, Dark Souls, where you can kick the shield away. This game doesn't give you the option to do that. So I'm going to do my best to make use of the parry mechanic in the game. If you block with perfect timing as you get hit, then you can parry, and there are two bosses in all of the game where you can actually capitalize on that with a riposte. The issue is that if you're using any weapon except for the sword and shield, you take damage if you guard the attacks without parrying perfectly. So, in order to do an appreciable amount of damage to this boss, you've really got to be riposting. Eventually I'll get it. There we go. And yeah, I don't think that's any more damage than I would do with a riposte with just the straight sword, so this is what I'm sticking with for the rest of the fight. I'm told that every boss has a specific weakness to either one of your attack items or a particular weapon that you can capitalize on to do extra damage to them or stagger them or something. It's really hard to tell whether any of that stuff actually has a lot of meaning to the game. And most of the time it's just stuff that I'm not going to be able to do anyway. As you can see, I do about the same damage with a riposte, no matter which weapon I'm using. It seems like the Greatsword and the Blades of Gluttony are just slower without actually providing any meaningful benefit. So, very early into the fight, Yordo just starts running away from you constantly and summoning his minions to do absolutely anything. Which would be fine, except catching up to him can be a pain, and yeah, you're invincible while you're riposting, but the enemies can surround you and just jam you with their spears. The issue with this fight is that if you do wait around playing it defensively like you're probably intended to, it's just going to take absolutely forever. You want to try to lure Yordo out from the pack, get him away from all of his fellows, and then attack him as much as you can. Even if you interrupt that summoning animation, as you can see, he still summons all the soldiers. And that was the exhaustion effect. Sometimes it's not going to hurt you all that much. Sometimes it'll mean the death of you. Yeah, it was too far away there to do a riposte. But he's about half dead, so probably about time for him to go into his desperation phase. Every boss has got one. Some of them, like Feistelus, were really awful. For Yordo, it's not too bad. He just switches to a greatsword. which means that instead of charging you and stabbing you with a spear, he's charging you and spinning around. The good news is, at least with his greatsword, you can still parry with good timing. The other greatsword boss in the game, you can't. At least as far as I've ever been able to tell. But he's low enough on health, and I've got enough lightning spears that I can kinda take him out from afar and just throw these spears at him until I run out. Which is probably going to be my plan if he keeps running away from me like that. I'd say none of your attack weapons generally do enough damage to really make much of a difference. But I've got a lot of them here. I haven't given up half of them yet. So if I don't have to get close, and of course a lot of times he's going to choose to stay away from me, I might as well just throw stuff at him. The item targeting in the game is really nice. You know, obviously some of the bosses will dodge the stuff you throw at them. But as long as you're locked on, your character will throw at the correct distance, you know, all the way across the battlefield. You'll just be hurling these spears and hitting your target every time. I do have to watch my back at this point. Those soldiers are closing in with their great swords. But really, he's dead. That was a lot shorter than I was expecting it to be. And that's 2 bosses down. I think these are some of the sacrifices most people wait until the end to do. They're just the first 2 bosses I managed to figure out how to beat. And, yep, we get the liquid running into the pool. Whatever that's supposed to symbolize. And I guess, you know, not having died, I guess I got time to go after another one. Levin Undok is the next one that I take on. At this point, you really have to start thinking about which are the sacrifices that are least going to hurt you as you go after the remaining bosses. And, you know, contrary to that last fight, I don't usually use a lot of items, so giving up most of my inventory is not that much of a sacrifice for me. In fact, I kind of recommend you swap the order of these 2 bosses that I'm doing here, because you're not going to be hurting much against Yordo without extra lightning spears to throw, but against this boss, the exhaustion is really going to hurt you. So here we fight the mechanical Levin Undok. Slight change from the name that's on the tombstone there. She is a mechanical doll of some kind that is a master of weapons and telekinesis. As you can see, she hurls all sorts of axes and daggers and predictable patterns that don't make it any easier to dodge them. And she's got, I believe that's an epee, which she will swing at you, and this is why I bring the sword and shield to this fight. But then she's got a second head that she'll swap to, and this is Levin Undok, the mechanical doll which controls lightning. She will attack with the epee still, but most of the time she's just going to use the lightning. And she's got 3 different attack patterns. One creates these spots of light on the floor that the lightning will strike, with a bit of splash damage every time. Then she'll charge herself up for an area attack. And finally, she'll have the lightning strike somewhere and spread out around it. And here goes the epee attack, and she's already switching. Do not rush in for attacks while she's switching, because she has some kind of area effect when she swaps heads that will blow you away and do some damage. I just keep switching weapons back and forth. The shield is actually useful against the Undok form, and against the Undok form, there's not a lot you can do with your shield, so I swap to the slower weapon. You can mostly dodge that spinning attack, and then these axes come out and you really just kind of want to get away. I didn't notice until doing the post-commentary, but if you hit Undok with the lightning javelin while she's got the daggers floating around her, they'll all fall down. So at the very least, you won't have to deal with that particular attack. And in the case of most bosses, the difficult part of their attacks is not so much any individual attack, but the fact that they'll set up one attack and then perform another attack, and trying to dodge the combination of multiple attacks at the same time is just painful. I'm convinced there are spots where not even the most expert player would be able to get through it without taking a lot of damage. There, I just forgot again about getting too close while she's swapping heads. While you can dodge the epee, I typically just... I avoid it rather than blocking. Especially since that will kind of throw you for a loop, and if you don't get out of the way of all those axes, you can take a ton of damage, because there are just a dozen or so of them flying at you, and each one will knock you into the path of the next. So we're very near this boss's desperation attack. And here it comes! Once you've gotten either of the bodies down to about half health, it will summon the other body, and the two of them will attack in tandem. This is where the exhaustion really starts to hurt, and where you want to save up all of your throwing weapons for, so that you don't have to get too close to them. I'm sure there's a better strategy for this part than just throwing everything you've got. I really don't know what that is. I was never very good at the multi-part bosses in any of the Souls games. And in this case, probably your best bet is just to go for whichever body is lower on health at the time. But getting too close to Undok is still fatal. I'm sure there's a specific opinion out there about which one of them is the better one to focus on when you've got both of them coming at you. Sometimes it doesn't really matter, because there's nothing to indicate that the edge of the room is coming up over on this side. Some bosses you fight in kind of an infinite arena. Most of them falling off the side is a major problem. And this is an illustration of why not to attempt to block if you're not using the shield. So I think here I'm doing okay. Dealing with Undok, keeping my distance from Undok, who, while she can attack from a distance, you can at least watch for signs, and I've never seen this attack before. The first time I beat the game, I fought these two many times. Never, ever saw them do that tandem attack. But I'm still just going to go after Undok. Every 2 spears I hit her with will stagger her, but I went in for the kill, got greedy, ended up taking a 2-shot of lightning and axes. And again, letting myself get exhausted right as I'm trying to put some damage into them. I think really, deal with these two before you do Yordo. And getting directly hit by the spreading lightning attack does way too much damage. It's alright. We're here for the final triumphant fight. Once you understand the pattern of her weapon attacks, most of them aren't going to do all that much damage to you. And I think sometimes it is worth going ahead and taking some hits to put in extra damage. Really just kind of wanted to show off that parry. You can parry most of the bosses, I think. Some of them I'm sure you can't, and others won't do you a whole lot of good. I kind of think against Undok you want to play defensively. Keep your distance, go in for attacks when she comes after you. For Undok, I discovered when she does her epee attack is a great time to pile on damage. Especially if you can get behind them. Either one of them, really. Behind them is the best spot to be in. And when Undok does the point lightning attacks, you can also get in some hits then. As long as you're careful not to be too close if she's hitting herself with the lightning. A lot of times she'll spread it out across the room, and then you get a lot of opportunities to get in there, do some damage before the lightning gets close. And if you can slip between the axes that way, that's pretty nice. Kind of a slick dodge, but not something I would recommend playing for. I know there's a way to figure out what lightning attack she's going to do based on exactly how she moves, but it's really hard to distinguish between the various lightning attacks she does that aren't the single area one. That one at least is pretty obvious. Yeah, see, I can't tell if she charges up her sword which attack she's going to use. The other real problem with the many points of lightning attack is that if you're backing away from her, as you kinda have to do, you can't see the lightning attacks that are coming from behind. You could unlock your camera focus, but I don't think that's going to help either. Plus, then you lose track of where the boss is, and that's never good. Healing is not always beneficial at all. That's another Dark Souls staple. Hey, at the very least, only getting hit by 2 axes is better than usual. And I think I've kind of got the hang of dodging the epee attack. Just, roll, swing, roll twice, swing again. That really seems to be the key to everything you do in this game. Figure out the boss's patterns, figure out the exact sequence of moves that you have to use to defend against it, and then be able to perform those moves perfectly every time. And don't get too close to the lightning. Even watching it in post, sometimes I really can't tell what the heck I was supposed to do, if there even is a supposed. But once you're out of healing, you can swap over to your attack items and not feel like you're putting yourself in any danger. I can't heal anymore other than the auto regen, so I might as well just run around the field and throw items whenever I get an opening. I think Undok's got a little more health than I'm likely to be able to take off with the items, but with good stamina management I can keep running pretty much forever. and I was off the edge when I started the throw. One big problem I have with this game, and I don't know whether it's specific to this game or if it's just the controller that I'm using, but the right trigger on it is really finicky. A lot of times I hit the button to say that I want to run, and I don't run. But this is going to be the actual final fight. You can block the spinning attack completely. It does do a little bit of damage, but you're going to recover that automatically by the time the move is finished. I admit, this looks really bad, and I kind of wish this wasn't the final fight so I could have just cut out the start of it and gone straight to the next fight. But I'm actually doing really good damage so far, I think. I'd say less lightning, more sword attacks, please. Those are really nice. I think the best thing to do with a spreading lightning attack is actually kind of to roll into the center of it as best you can. Because that'll usually get you through the line of lightning that's spreading out across the floor. It takes her a surprisingly long time to swap heads. You can really take advantage of that. And here again, when she goes in for the sword attacks, getting behind her is the best thing to do. The real issue is sometimes you need to be close to dodge attacks, sometimes you need to be far away. There's not really a good way to tell where you should be at any particular time. This time I lure the lightning attacks away from her and then charge in to get some hits. That's likely to be your best strategy. And then she'll do the spreading lightning attack. You run away, slip between the attacks. She will always do all 4 sword swipes, I think. Unless you do something really drastic to interrupt in the middle. Again, I didn't get out of the way quite in time there. And here I'm taking a heck of a lot of sacrifice hits to get in some extra damage. Because the Undok body is almost finished. We'll just see if we can wear down the other one before it's time. Probably should not have gone for so many hits there, but it's okay, because now that means we can take out the Undok body during the dual attack. This is actually probably the better way to do it now that I think about it. Because you're going to try to stay away from both of them this whole time, but Undok is the easier one to damage if you get close, because she doesn't have a lot of long-range attacks. Most of the time she is going to rush right at you with that sword. And because while I am throwing items at her, that'll disrupt a lot of her telekinetic weapon attacks. Not really a whole lot of point to throwing items at them while they're dancing like this. Probably should have just hid behind one of the columns, honestly. And the firebombs really don't seem to do a whole lot. And they leave some flames afterward, and I think it does a bit of damage over time if I manage to get in some hits. But it just isn't really going to work for this setting, and I exhausted myself, but that is one body down. So now I'm back to just kind of the standard single body pattern. And once you've defeated one of the bodies completely, the other one starts calling down chandeliers. it might be a good idea to try to take out Undok first with regard to this phase, because if Undok is the one that survives, then the chandeliers will fall down with bursts of electricity. If Undok survives, then they just fall down and will splat where they land. But the single body is honestly not much of a challenge anymore, not after all the practice you'll have had by this point. All the attempts that you'll have made. I am completely out of resources. It's just me, whatever health I've got, and a few more hits worth of damage. And there's the final epee attack, I'm sure. And that's this boss, finally down. I think you can still die after killing the boss if they've got an attack still out there. It's never happened to me, so I'm not too worried about it. We get our pittance of extra health, already reduced by having defeated Faistalas. And that's 3 bosses down out of the 7. Again, I still really can't tell you anything much about who any of these people are, or were. I don't know that anybody who's reached this point much is going to care. But next time, we'll start taking on the bosses that require you to make sacrifices that really matter.